Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking down the last event of the 2024 PGA Tour season, the Tour Championship. Now, this is an event that I think is played at quite a nice golf course, but it's going to be a little bit different this year. And this is an event that has a little bit of a quirky format. So here on today's episode, we're going to tell you everything you need to know in order to build DFS lineups, in order to make bets, or anything in between. With the changes that have been made to this course and with the unique format of this event, we're going to make sure you are super informed so that whatever game you're playing this week here at East Lake, you're going to be able to find the right players and pick the winners. Now, with this being the last event of the PGA Tour season, golf is going to take like a few week break. I will not be breaking down the President's Cup because it's quite a difficult event to break down. And plus, college football is like officially back this week. NFL is officially back next week. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel that we can be with us for all of our content for the start of football season. And we will pick back up with the fall swing. Yes, we will be covering the fall swing of the PGA Tour. There's still money to be made during those events. So make sure you're subscribed so that way you can be with us when we resume our golf coverage then. Now, in the meantime, make sure you hit the like button on YouTube, rate and review the podcast on audio as well. If we've helped you in any way this season, find a winner betting, have some DFS lineups, do well in one and done, whatever, help me out, like the video, rate and review, spread the word, and help the channel grow so that way we can find more people and build the community even more. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather. We're going to end the intro there, and then we're going to go ahead and dive into East Lake. All right, so East Lake Golf Club in Atlanta, Georgia has been the host of the Tour Championship for pretty much as long as I can remember. Ever since I've been watching golf, East Lake has been the host of this event. So what that means is you generally have pretty reliable course history. For a lot of the players who make this event every year, it has been a small field event as long as I've been watching golf. So I don't know, maybe back in the early 2000s or in the 90s if this was a full field event or not. But anyway, this event's been pretty much the same exact event for like the last 2 decades. But there was a big change made in 2019. Basically, what had always happened was the Tour Championship and the FedEx Cup used to be dichotomous. They were 2 separate tournaments going on within the tournament. So you could win the Tour Championship and not win the FedEx Cup. You could win the FedEx Cup and not win the Tour Championship. It really confused everybody. When Tiger Woods won the event in 2018 but did not win the FedEx Cup, that was really when the most attention ever was on this event, was when Tiger won for the first time in what felt like forever at this event in 2018. And so in 2019, the PGA Tour introduced a starting strokes format where players were going to be rewarded for their play throughout the regular season in the FedEx Cup playoffs with starting strokes ahead of the field. And then the winner of the FedEx Cup playoffs is going to be crowned as the winner of the Tour Championship. Or maybe I had that backwards. The winner of the Tour Championship was going to be crowned as the winner of the FedEx Cup playoffs. Either way, they basically made it one event with the starting strokes. Now, we're going to break down who has those starting strokes here this week, but that is something to know as you go in to make your bets and make your DFS lineups. Now, East Lake Golf Club itself is going to look quite different this year as well. The course has seen a restoration. It is an old school classical Donald Ross design. And Andrew Green, who's basically one of the kings of modern golf architecture renovation. He also renovated Oak Hill. He went in this past year after the conclusion of the Tour Championship last year and pretty much dug the golf course up and redid it to make it, kind of fit more of its original vision when Donald Ross designed it. So this took a lot of trees out. This put a lot more bunkers in. The greens were entirely redone. This was previously a very claustrophobic golf course with some of the narrowest fairways on the PGA Tour and some very tree-lined fairways. I do expect the fairways to still play pretty narrow. I do think there's going to be less trees. I do think if you miss the fairways, there's going to be Bermuda rough. But I think the biggest difference that you're going to see at East Lake this week is the greens themselves. New greens, and we saw this at Colonial Country Club this year, home of the Charles Schwab Challenge. We saw this at Oak Hill, the PGA Championship 2 years ago. New greens tend to be very, very firm and fast. Simply put, I could explain the physics for, long form if I wanted to, but I really don't want to. Basically, new greens are firm and fast because the amount of golf balls that get hit into the green and make an impact on the green year after year after year kind of just weigh the green down and it becomes a softer surface, right? So that's why new greens tend to play much firmer and faster than old ones. Now, the scorecard is changing a little bit also. Basically, a long par 4 on the back 9 became a middle length par 5. And so what was a par 70 over 7,300 yards is now going to be a par 71, a little over 7,400 yards. This is still a long track. You you usually do not see par 71s that are over 7,400 yards. So basically this week, the formula for winning when you play East Lake is going to be hit a lot of fairways, which is not easy because they're quite narrow. But you're going to want to do that because the rough is quite thick and it's very difficult to hit and hold Bermuda greens with this thick rough. And then get it on the green and try to make your birdie putt. And Donald Ross greens are notoriously not easy to putt on. So what you're going to see this week is you're going to see a lot of pars. In my opinion, I do not expect this tournament to play very easy. And what I think that does is I think that plays into the hands of the guys who are starting with more strokes ahead. I don't think this is going to be quite as difficult as a major championship, but I do think that this week you can look at guys who have played well in major championships for a little bit of success. This course is going to feature thick rough. It's going to feature a lot of long irons on approach. It's going to play long. It's going to be pretty difficult. So major championship-esque conditions are what you're going to see here at East Lake this week. On the scorecard, pretty much all the par fours are going to be pretty long, multiple par fours over 500 yards. The three par fives are going to be quite scoreable, but the par threes are really tough. And so there's just not going to be a whole lot of scoring to go around this week here at East Lake. That's just from everything I've seen with what I know about the renovation and what I've seen from the scorecard. I just do not expect this to be a very easy week here on the PGA Tour. So in terms of the key stats this week here at East Lake, what we talk about on a week-to-week basis, week in, week out, strokes gained approach is going to be one of the most important stats. I also think total driving is going to be important. I do think that you give yourself an advantage by being long at this golf course, but I think you give yourself a real advantage by being long and accurate at this golf course. So I think that is going to be something that I'm going to look at as well. I also want to look at strokes gained putting. If you have the ability to filter out Bermuda greens and fast greens, I think that is something you might want to look at as well. And then I also want to look at performance in strong fields as well as scrambling. Basically, when there are a lot of other good golfers around at a difficult golf course, can you make pars where others make bogey? Can you make birdies where others make par? My two comp courses, it's a short list this week, is just Oak Hill and Colonial. They're two courses that are, par 70 and par 71. They have been redesigned recently. They are very firm and fast greens. They are very narrow fairways. So I think that those are two really good fits in terms of comp courses. Now, in terms of course history here at East Lake, with it being a yearly host on the PGA Tour, you have a lot of a sample size this week to know who's good and who's not at East Lake. And Xander Schauffele is the king of East Lake. In the last 5 years, ever since starting strokes have been invented, he's never finished outside the top 5. Last year, Wyndham Clark was quite good, finishing in 3rd place. Chris Kirk also has good history here, as well as does Victor Hovland, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, Tom Hoagie, Russell Henley, and Sepp Straka. Those are kind of the leaders of course history here. In terms of the guys who play here every year, Tony Finau gets to this tournament every year. Adam Scott gets to this tournament more often than not. Sungjae Im has gotten to this tournament each of the last 5 years. Patrick Cantlay has a pretty good history making this event, as does Hideki Matsuyama. All right, so that does it for the course itself. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to talk about the starting strokes. All right, so this is the time where if you're looking to take down any notes or if you're looking to do a screenshot or anything, this would be the time to do that. Underdog Golf, Underdog of the Underdog Fantasy Company, they tweeted out a list of the Tour Championship starting strokes yesterday, and it's a very well done graphic, very easy to read. So that's what I'm looking from here on Twitter. And what you see is that Scottie Scheffler, the current leader in the FedEx Cup standings, is starting at -10 with a 2-stroke lead over Xander Schauffele, who has a 1-stroke lead over Hideki Matsuyama, who's over Keegan Bradley, who's over Ludwig Oberg, and the -4 crew that rounds out the top 10 is Wyndham Clark, Sam Burns, Rory McIlroy, Patrick Cantlay, and Colin Morikawa. So here's what basically ends up happening here, y'all. Scottie Scheffler, because of how dominant he's been this season, is now starting 2 strokes clear of everybody, but 6 strokes clear of 83% of the field. So, Scottie Scheffler, a guy who has won a third of his starts this season, a guy who has been in the top 5 in 2/3 of his starts this season, is starting with a 6-stroke advantage over 80% of the field. That is, that's staggering. It's quite difficult to me to make a case for Scottie to finish outside of the top 5 at this event, certainly to finish outside the top 10 at this event, not only because of how good he is, but because of how far ahead he's starting, right? It just makes it a really tough task for him to fall down the leaderboard. And Xander Schauffele, a guy who's having a season that is one of the best seasons we've seen in recent memory, if Scotty wasn't winning everything, we'd be talking about Xander as an easy player of the year candidate. Xander is the breakout star of 2024. Xander is the best player in the world, but Scotty's just done everything a little bit better. And Xander's starting 2 shots back, and Xander's the king of Eastlake. So it is really hard for me to imagine anybody chasing those 2 guys down. If I was betting on a winner this week, I would not bet outside of Scotty Scheffler and Xander Schauffele. Now, I understand that the value on those guys, like in terms of the actual odds, is pretty bad. But in terms of the actual percentage chance of them winning the tournament, I think that Scotty Scheffler, starting with a 2-stroke edge over literally the entire field, has better than a 50% chance to win the tournament. So if you can get plus odds on Scotty Scheffler to win, maybe if you can parlay it with like a college football game or something this weekend, I think that that's a pretty good strategy to bet. I also think that there's value on betting Xander Schauffele as well. Now, with the historical use of starting strokes going back 5 years, no one has won this tournament from further back than -4. So you can basically rule out 2/3 of the field from even winning this tournament because no one's won it from -4 back. Rory won it in 2022, chasing Scotty down when he started at -4. So that's really the extent of people you can bet outright to win. But with the starting strokes, I do think that there's some pretty good value on betting some top 10 and top 20 markets out there because, you've got guys that if you want to bet them top 20, they're starting with a head start, or guys that, to get top 10, yeah, they're starting at a little bit of a disadvantage, but it's only like a 1 or 2 shot advantage to 10th place. It's not as much as the difference from 10th to 1st. So I do think there is a little bit of value in that regard this week. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the stats and dive down the rabbit hole. Now, if you've been with us all season long, you know that when I refer to the rabbit hole, I'm talking about the tool from BetSpertsGolf.com, known as the rabbit hole, that gives you all different kinds of filters and conditions in order to kind of really deep dive the stats that you're going to want for each specific golf course. It has helped me out a ton this week, or this year, I should say. One thing that I wanted to look at, though, is they do have a tool called floor ceiling. You can't put it in a custom model because it's really hard to quantify. But basically, what you can see is the golfers with the highest ceiling in the field. In other words, how many times do they gain 5 strokes plus in a single round, right? And so basically, this tool will allow you to kind of identify who actually has a chance to, go super low and really catch up, because the key to playing DFS this week, or the key to making some top 10 and top 20 bets, is going to be, figuring out who can really go get it from behind, who can come from the back of the pack and end up making, a charge at it. So to nobody's surprise, Scotty Scheffler is number 1 in this category. But second is Sam Burns, third is Xander Schauffele, fourth is Shane Lowry, fifth is Wyndham Clark. So those are some guys that you might want to target that do have high ceilings on an individual round-by-round basis. Now, in terms of building the custom model for this week, what I did want to do was look at, the important stats that I think are out there for Eastlake. And so, week in, week out, one of the most important stats is strokes gained approach. The best in the field on approach in the calendar year 2024, Scheffler, Hoge, Schauffele, Lowry, Rye, Finau. I also wanted to kind of double dip and do strokes gained ball striking, which will kind of give you, additional stats on approach, but also off the tee play as well. Top in the field in ball striking, Scheffler, Schauffele, Oberg, Lowry, Rye, Hovland. Total driving, which I think is important this week because I do think you're going to want to be long, and I do think you're going to want to be in the fairway. Oberg, Scheffler, McIlroy, Schauffele, Fleetwood, Bradley, Thiegawa, Bhatia, and Scott are all tied at that 5th spot. Now, strokes gained approach, I went a little bit deeper, though. I went strokes gained approach on courses that have fairway Bermuda grass and Bermuda grass rough, which is what you're going to see at Eastlake this week. In this category, Bhatia, Scheffler, Rye, Hoge, Lowry, and Henley were at the top of the list. I also wanted to look at scrambling from all of 2024. Schauffele, Matsuyama, McIntyre, Zadenhoop, Scheffler, and Rye were the top of the field in there. I also wanted to look at specifically comp courses. So I wanted to look at Donald Ross courses first. The best Donald Ross players over the last 5 years in this field have been Schauffele, Henley, Cantlay, McIlroy, Hovland, and Rye. When it's Donald Ross courses, that's going to include Sedgefield. It's going to include Oak Hill. Is going to include, there's one I'm forgetting, Detroit Golf Club. And I feel like there's another one. Oh, Pinehurst is also a Donald Ross course. Next up, we have strokes gained total on long golf courses because, like I said, this is going to play as a long golf course this week. This is going to be a good gauge of who the long iron players in this field are. McIlroy, Schauffele, Scheffler, Hovland, Finau, Cantlay are your top 6 there. I also wanted to look at strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass greens. Bermuda Burns, 1, followed by Henley, Pavone, Horschel, Pendrith, and Cantlay. On fast greens, you've got Oberg, Fleetwood, Henley, Burns, Horschel, and McIlroy. So you can kind of marry up, fast greens and Bermuda greens by looking at those two stats there. And then I also wanted to look at strokes gained on all of my comp courses, which were Oak Hill, Colonial, and Eastlake. So those three courses, who are the best in the field? You've got Hovland, Schauffele, Scheffler, Lowry, Straka, and Keegan Bradley coming in as number 6. All right, now throw all of that into a custom model, and here's what you get. You end up with Xander Schauffele coming in as number 1. So here's the interesting part of that. I think when it comes to Schauffele versus Scheffler, there's a big debate to be had. We are going to get to that with the last segment here today. But really, the list gets interesting after that. McIlroy 3rd, Aaron Rai 4th. Aaron Rai significantly outperforming his position in the FedEx Cup standings, significantly outperforming his DraftKings salary in my custom model. That makes him a very appealing play in DraftKings to me. Why does Aaron Rai rank so highly? Well, he's really good at ball striking. He's been really good at Donald Ross courses, and he is a fairway finder with a good short game. So, he's not necessarily the longest player in the field, but he does a lot of things right for what we're looking for this week. Russell Henley is 5, another guy who plays really well in the Southeast, another fairway finder with a good short game, great Bermuda putter. So those two guys might have the early checklist for me in terms of DFS value plays, Ryan Henley. 6 is Ludwig Oberg, a long and accurate driver of the golf ball. That's going to play pretty much anywhere. Victor Hovland 7, Shane Lowry 8, Colin Morikawa 9, Hideki Matsuyama 10. Now, what we can also do is we can resort it by DraftKings salary and kind of figure out, is there anybody who outperforms or significantly underperforms in my custom model? All right, the model did not like Matsuyama. It did not like Bradley. It did not like Burns. It did not like Wyndham Clark. Did not like Adam Scott. Did not like Sahith Theegala. Certainly did not like Robert McIntyre. And Kirk and Pavone are at the bottom, but they're at the bottom in salary as well. So that is what we got for the first run through the custom model. What's interesting about a lot of the guys that it did not like, have played particularly well in the last 2 FedEx Cup playoff events, which what that means is it means that not only are they coming in on good recent form, but it means that they are elevated in the FedEx Cup standings from where they probably should be, which has elevated their starting strokes, which has elevated their DraftKings salary. So just kind of a little bit of explaining the weeds of how those were calculated. Now, one thing I will say, this is just the first run through of my model. I do tinker with it all week long. So on a weekly basis, I do write an article to my Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks, where I highlight the final top 10 in my model. I also write a full write-up on, how I made the model, and I also have my DFS core plays for both DraftKings and FanDuel on a weekly basis. So if you want to get in for this season, go ahead and join now. I'll be doing it the same thing at the start of the next PGA Tour season, but also college football and NFL start this week. So you will have access to my NFL preseason rankings, the full fantasy football season rankings, that is. I don't know why I made it sound like it was for preseason games. The preseason just ended. And then you will also get access to my weekly DFS course for both college football and NFL on DraftKings as well as FanDuel. So head on over to patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks if you would like to get in on that. All right. That's going to do it for the rabbit hole. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the board, and let's see if we can figure out some guys to look at in DFS and some bets to make this week. So what is possibly the most interesting conundrum in DFS this week is Scotty or Xander, Scheffler or Schauffele. That's going to make the final edit too, because StreamYard makes it really hard to edit that out. That was quite the blunder. So basically, which one of the world's 2 best players are you going to use in your lineups? Well, here's the thing. DraftKings has historically really factored in starting strokes into their pricing for DFS lineups, and they really didn't this year. Scheffler and Schauffele are not unreasonably expensive. So it is conceivable that you can actually pair both of them together in the same lineup, which to me gives your lineup 80% win equity between playing both of those guys. Now, it does put a little bit of a hamper on you. Your average remaining salary is about $6,700. So you really have to dumpster dive and find some chasers. But it's certainly a possibility. If you really want to get a lot of win equity, then you can go Scheffler, Schauffele to start your lineup. I do not think that you have to choose between one of them. Now, if you were choosing, it's a very interesting conundrum because Xander is Mr. Course History. He's Mr. Eastlake. He's also playing better golf right now. Scheffler is better at all of the micro skills of playing this golf course than Xander Schauffele. Scheffler is a more accurate driver of the golf ball. Scheffler is generally a better approach player. Scheffler is a better long iron player. Scheffler is a better around the green player. So Scheffler checks a lot of boxes, but Schauffele's Mr. Eastlake. So it all depends on what you value. I'm going to be playing both of them in DFS this week. If I were to bet one, I would probably look and see if I could find Scheffler at plus money somewhere, or if I could find Xander at about at least 4-1 somewhere, if you can find that, or maybe get something boosted up to that. But either way, I think those two guys by and away are the two guys that are going to be super highly owned this week. You don't have to play just one. You can play both if you want to, but your decision on that, whether you play one or both, is going to make or break how DFS goes this week, along with finding the right chasers from the bottom of the board. Now, I would highly advise not skipping these two players. I think you got to play at least one, Scheffler and Schauffele. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't, not only because they're the two best players in the world, not only because they're very reasonably priced, but because they're starting so much further ahead of everybody else. It's like giving Usain Bolt a head start to run a 100-yard dash. It's like giving Derrick Henry a full head of steam at the snap of a football. This is just giving two guys who are really good an extra advantage that they already don't need. So I think that you really want to play at least one of them in DFS this week. Now from there, I really like Rory this week. Obviously what we've seen about Rory recently has not been good, but he is historically great at Eastlake. He is historically at his best putting on Bermuda greens. He is historically at his best at long golf courses. And so really, I just think that Rory is the guy that you're going to want this week, and he's a guy that can chase. This is a guy that has won golf tournaments from behind. So Rory is probably the guy that I would want in that next little tier. Not to say that you can't play Matsuyama or Oberg, but Rory is probably going to be my favorite. He's probably going to come in with the most ownership because he is the one that has won this tournament from behind before. So just know that Rory, if you do play him, he's probably going to be the most popular in this range. I think Morikawa makes a lot of sense too with what we talked about for the profile of this course. He kind of didn't have a great BMW championship, but I'm willing to kind of write that off. I'm kind of willing to throw out the results from last week, if I'm being honest, y'all, because I think the altitude messed with a lot of people and you just didn't get a lot of confidence out of anybody. It seemed to be a very tentatively played golf tournament, if I'm being honest, except for Keegan and Ludwig. They kind of seem to be their normal aggressive selves. So I'm kind of willing to throw out last week, and I'm willing to go back to Morikawa, a guy who is a great approach player, a guy who has been doing better in the short game recently, and a guy who is going to find a lot of fairways and is a deceptively good long iron player. I think this is a pretty good spot for Collin Morikawa. Now, I also think this is a pretty good spot for Adam Scott. What he's been doing recently, I know he didn't grade out well on my model. It's because everything that he's done has been the last few events. But what he's done recently is nothing to sneeze at. He gained over a stroke per round on approach last week. Adam Scott is normally not a good putter. He's gained strokes with the putter in 5 straight events. One of those was on Bermuda greens at the FedEx St. Jude. So I think that this is a pretty good spot for Adam Scott. He's got plenty of history at this course. I'm certainly willing to go back to him. Tony Finau is another guy right below him that to me checks a lot of the micro skill boxes for what we want at Eastlake. He's a great long iron player. He's great at long courses. He's a great total driver of the golf ball. He just can't putt. And so if Finau actually brings the putter this week, he's a guy that you need to look out for. And then Sungjae Im at 7,500. This is just I don't know. This almost seems too cheap for me. Even though he's not starting with the most strokes, he's at his best putting on Bermuda. He is now a Georgia resident, so he should be used to this type of climate, this type of course. And he is ball striking really well right now. He's gained strokes on approach in 7 of his last 8 events, the only exception being the Wyndham Championship, where he had to play 36 holes in a day. So willing to forgive that one a little bit. So Sungjae's just he profiles for the course really well. He's at a very reasonable price tag. I think he's going to be pretty popular in DFS, though, so be ready to pivot somewhere else if you do want to play Sungjae. But I think it makes a lot of sense if you're going a Scotty Rory lineup or a Scotty Morikawa lineup. It makes sense to have, Im as your 3rd or 4th guy to line up, in my opinion. Now, we already talked about my affinity for Russell Henley, so I'm not going to do that again. But in terms of the chasers this week, I think you've got some options. I think there's some guys down here that can actually make a run. Billy Horschel has won a tour championship before at this course. So he knows how to play this event. He knows how to play this course. He's in pretty good form out of everybody in this group. He's probably in the best form coming in. Akshay Bhatia, I think, is just actually good. And he checks a lot of the micro skill boxes that we're looking for this week. He is generally a really good approach player. He is generally a really good total driver of the golf ball. He is generally a really good Bermuda putter. And so those are some skills that we're looking for this week. He hasn't been in his best ball striking form recently. And if he's able to bring back the ball striking form that he had earlier in the season, I think this is a pretty good spot for him. Plus, he's really good on courses with Bermuda fairways and Bermuda rough. I think that's nothing to take lightly. I like Akshay this week at 6,900. I also like the next two, Justin Thomas and Sepp Straka. So the most famous comeback in terms of like recent golf memory, in my opinion, is Justin Thomas at the 2022 PGA Championship. The guy knows how to play from behind. The guy can get really aggressive. He understands the format of this event and that he's going to have to play aggressive if he wants to, win the big bucks this week. So I think he's just going to go at it and he's going to go after it. And I want a guy who I know can go get it this week, and he's a guy who can certainly go get it. Sepp Straka is kind of the same way. He did the same thing at the John Deere a few years back, and he's played deceptively well at my comp courses. He was great at Oak Hill. He's been great at Colonial. So these remodel courses with firm and fast greens, they're kind of his jam. He's a fairway finder. He's a great ball striker. Really think this is a pretty good spot for Sepp Straka this week at 6,700. And then we've already talked about Aaron Rai. He's probably like the bottom of the barrel play that I'm going with this week. I don't know if I'm going to play any of the guys below Aaron Rai, if I'm being honest. But Taylor Pendrith is interesting. Taylor Pendrith has been great recently, like truly great. And he's still fighting for a President's Cup spot. So there's somebody that has a lot of motivation here this week, and that's Taylor Pendrith. He's normally not a good putter, but he's been great with the putter over the summer months. He's been great on approach over the summer months. Not the best ball striking BMW Championship, but if he just turns the ball striking around, he can go right back to what he was doing at the start of the summer. Taylor Pendrith, another solid value option this week. All right, so that is going to do it for this episode, y'all. I know it's a little bit of a shorter episode for the Tour Championship, but it's a shorter field. It's a quirky event. We talked about the starting strokes. We talked about what you're going to want to look at this week. And one more thing, if you're playing one and done this week, first off, you shouldn't be playing one and done this week, in my opinion. If you're playing one and done this week, and your tournament uses starting strokes, just pick the guy closest to the top of the leaderboard that you have left that's a good course fit. If you are not using starting strokes, I actually think playing a guy further from the back of the pack could be better, a guy that profiles well for the tournament, like maybe one of the guys we talked about. If your tournament, just know the format of your league if you're playing one. That's the best advice I can give you. If your one and done plays the Tour Championship, put it in the comments on YouTube as well as on audio. I kind of want to know how that's done. I've done it that way once. I was in a one and done that used to use strokes to par as a scoring method, and so we did not use starting strokes in that regard for that tournament. And so you could really play some different guys, knowing that it was the last event and knowing that some guys were going to have to go up and be aggressive and chase. But I'm just curious if your one and done plays the Tour Championship. Let me know how they do it, and I'm curious to kind of hear about it and see about it. And then also, if you think that golf needs to fix the Tour Championship, put it in the comments. Let me know, because I kind of think the way to go would be I would get rid of starting strokes. I'd keep it dichotomous. I would say that there's going to be a FedEx Cup winner and a Tour Championship winner, and there's nothing wrong with that. They play the whole season dichotomous, where there's the tournament and the FedEx Cup with the tournament within the tournament. So I would have no problem with them going back to the old format personally. That's just my personal opinion. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Hopefully we gave you guys some good information that's going to help you pick out some winners here this week at East Lake. If we helped you in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review on audio. I cannot express enough how much those help me. If we've helped you at all this season, then please help me out. Rate, interview. I really do appreciate it. And make sure you're subscribed. That way you can be with us for the start of football season, college football, and then NFL, and then for the resumption of the PGA Tour play here later in September. But otherwise, that's going to do it for this week, y'all. We talked the course itself. We talked the changes at the course. We talked about the uniqueness of the event. We talked about some DFS strategies. We talked about some betting strategies. So that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Like I said, hopefully we're able to give you guys some information to help you pick out some winners. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Thank you guys for being with us for the 2024 PGA Tour season. And that is going to do it for now, guys. Thank you guys.